Someone just submerged a wooden joint in a bucket of water. It has been in there for 48 hours, not damp, not misted, fully submerged, sitting underwater in a bucket on a workbench, while the person who made it does something else entirely. And when they pull it out, when they dry it off and grip both sides and pull with their full body weight, the joint does not move. It does not flex. It does not show the slightest signs of delamination or separation. The bond is as tight as the moment it was made, and the adhesive holding those two pieces of wood together was not purchased. It was not mixed from a two-part epoxy kit. It was not squeezed from a tube with a brand name on it. It was processed in about 5 minutes from a plant that grows in ditches, in vacant lots, along roadsides, in the cracks of sidewalks, in the unmowed corners of fields, and almost certainly within walking distance of wherever you are right now. A plant most people have spent their entire lives treating as a nuisance, pulling it, spraying it, cursing at it when it comes back 2 weeks after removal. A plant that has been quietly carrying one of the most remarkable adhesive properties in the natural world this entire time, while the adhesive industry charged you repeatedly for a synthetic approximation of what it does for free. What you are looking at is cattail, specifically the brown cylindrical seed head of the mature cattail plant, combined with a simple processing method that takes under 5 minutes and no tools beyond what most people already have in a basic kitchen. The resulting adhesive is waterproof, flexible when it needs to be, rigid when it cures, and bonds wood, leather, ceramic, stone, bark, and fabric with a hold that has been tested in conditions that would dissolve most consumer craft adhesives completely. The cost of the raw material is zero. The processing time is shorter than a trip to the hardware store. And the people who figured this out were not doing it as a survival experiment or a back-to-nature hobby. They were doing it because they needed something to hold, and they were paying close enough attention to the world around them to recognize that it already had an answer waiting. Before going further, it is worth being precise about what this adhesive actually is and why cattail produces it, because the science reveals something about this plant that most people have never been told, despite the fact that cattails grow prolifically across every temperate and subtropical region on Earth. The cattail seed head, that dense brown cylinder that looks almost like a hot dog on a stick, is composed of hundreds of thousands of tightly packed seeds, each attached to a fine silky fiber. When the seed head is harvested at the right stage, broken apart, and the fiber mass is processed with heat and minimal water, the natural resins and waxes present in the plant material consolidate into a dense, sticky, cohesive mass with adhesive properties that match or exceed several categories of commercial adhesive in specific performance metrics, particularly waterproof bonding and flexibility under stress. The fiber content in the processed material also adds tensile reinforcement to the adhesive layer. The same principle behind fiber-reinforced epoxy in modern composite materials. Nature figured out fiber-reinforced adhesive before materials engineers put a patent on the concept. This is not obscure ethnobotany that exists only in academic papers. This is documented applied knowledge across multiple continents and multiple millennia of use. Indigenous peoples across North America used cattail-based adhesives for tool hafting, securing stone points to wooden shafts in a bond that needed to withstand the impact forces of use without failing. Archaeological recovery of hafted tools with organic adhesive residue still present after centuries shows a material profile consistent with plant-based resins that researchers have identified in the cattail family. The Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe, and numerous other nations living in proximity to wetland environments incorporated cattail into their material culture so comprehensively that the plant was used for everything from shelter construction to food to cordage to waterproofing to adhesive. Not as multiple separate discoveries, but as an integrated understanding of a single plant's complete utility. In East Asian wetland agricultural communities, processed cattail fiber and resin were used to seal and waterproof wooden vessels, basket weaves, and structural joints in buildings constructed in high humidity environments where conventional organic adhesives failed from moisture exposure. The waterproofing property was not a bonus feature. It was the primary reason cattail adhesive was selected for those applications over alternatives. It performed in conditions where other options degraded. Now here is where the story follows the pattern that repeats every single time: a genuinely effective, genuinely free solution gets discussed in any context adjacent to a profitable market. The global adhesive market is worth over $60 billion annually and growing. It is a market built entirely on the premise that bonding things together requires a manufactured product with a proprietary formulation, a supply chain, a purchase transaction, and a recurring replenishment cycle when the tube runs out. A person who can walk to a wetland margin, harvest a plant that grows there uninvited, process it in 5 minutes on a camp stove, and produce a waterproof adhesive that outperforms what they would have bought at the hardware store for the specific application they need is simply not participating in that market for that product category. There is no mechanism for an industry to profit from that capability. So the capability never appears in sponsored content. It never makes it into mainstream DIY culture. It never gets featured in the home improvement media ecosystem that is structurally dependent on the same companies selling the products it covers. The knowledge does not disappear because someone suppressed it. It disappears because there is no economic engine driving its transmission, and in a world where information moves primarily through commercially incentivized channels, knowledge without a commercial sponsor becomes progressively harder to find. You have walked past this plant your whole life, probably dozens or hundreds of times. Cattails are one of the most visually distinctive plants in any landscape, that unmistakable brown cylinder rising above the reeds at the edges of ponds, ditches, and marshy ground. You recognized it. You probably knew its name. You may have picked one up as a child and pulled it apart, releasing the cloud of white seed fluff that makes it so tactilely satisfying to destroy. You were holding in your hands one of the most useful adhesive source materials in the natural world, and the framing you had been given for it was that it was an interesting looking weed. That is not an accident of perception. It is the predictable result of a culture that teaches the names of things but not their functions, the appearance of materials but not their properties, the landscape as scenery rather than as resource. Here is the exact mechanism at work, explained as simply as the chemistry allows. Cattail seed heads contain plant-based resins, waxes, and long-chain organic compounds within the dense fiber matrix of the seed mass. When this material is exposed to heat in the presence of a small amount of water or moisture, those compounds soften, become mobile within the fiber matrix, and begin to flow together. As the material cools, they re-solidify into a cohesive mass that has both adhesive surface chemistry and structural fiber reinforcement. The adhesive surface chemistry comes from the polar functional groups in the plant resins, which form strong intermolecular bonds with the surface chemistry of wood, leather, ceramic, and stone. The fiber reinforcement comes from the silk-like seed fibers that remain integrated throughout the adhesive mass and add tensile strength across the bond line. The waterproofing comes from the wax fraction of the plant chemistry, which creates a hydrophobic barrier within the cured adhesive that prevents water molecules from penetrating and disrupting the bond. The result is chemically similar in its functional performance to hide glue combined with a wax impregnation treatment, a combination that furniture makers and instrument builders pay significant money to approximate with separate specialty products. Here is exactly how to process this material and produce a working adhesive. And the simplicity of the process is the part that most people find hardest to believe until they try it. Break the head apart into a heat-safe container, a small metal pot, a tin can, a ceramic bowl that can withstand direct flame, or a camp stove. You want to break it into loose chunks rather than fully separating all the fiber, as maintaining some structure in the material makes it easier to work with during processing. Add a very small amount of water to the material, just enough to create slight steam during heating. Too much water will make the adhesive watery and weak. Too little will cause scorching before the resins have fully mobilized. A few drops to a teaspoon, depending on the volume of material you are processing, is the right range. This is the step that requires the most judgment and improves with practice. Apply gentle heat while stirring continuously. A low camp stove flame or a low setting on a kitchen burner works perfectly. You are not trying to cook the material. You are trying to reach a temperature where the resins soften and begin to flow within the fiber matrix. This happens at well below boiling point. You will see the material change consistency from dry and crumbly to slightly cohesive and sticky as the resins mobilize. The color will deepen slightly. The smell will shift from dry plant matter to something slightly resinous and warm. This is the moment. Remove from heat. While still warm and pliable, apply the material directly to the surfaces being bonded. Press the surfaces together firmly and hold with light clamping pressure while the adhesive cools and the resins resolidify. Cooling time is typically 3 to 7 minutes at room temperature. If the application requires waterproofing specifically, apply the adhesive in a slightly thicker layer and allow it to cool completely before exposing to moisture. Here is what